So I leave the Canary Islands, have a dreamy, unusual week of beautiful sailing, and I'm just like exercising and reading my books and all of that, just fantastic. And you rarely get that, especially in the northern part of the North Atlantic, because you're always getting slammed by gales and stuff. And I got about a week out, and a gale was brewing up, pretty big waves, not probably 10 feet, 10, 12 feet, something like that, significant wave height. And but I wasn't too worried. The boat and I had been through a lot at this point. And suddenly, bam, something seems to have hit the side of the boat. It looks like a World War II submarine diving with the hatches open. Yeah. Just water just like coming in like crazy. I bail out into a life raft, which is a couple of big like inner tubes, one stacked on the other with a tent across the top. And I spend the next 2.5 months learning to live like an aquatic caveman.
An aquatic caveman.
Yeah, that's the story.
That's a really good way to
That's a story in a nutshell, because that's exactly what it was like. I considered it my cave. I have a little entry thing, and I would crawl in the cave and look out my entry opening into the world. And I was kind of semi-safe within the cave. And I was living about as a rudimentary existence as you could possibly get.
Today we are talking to Stephen Callahan, author, sailor, boat maker. How would you describe your career?
I'm not sure as I can describe my career. My career is basically stumbling from one thing into another. I was obsessed with boats when I was young, from the time I was like 13 or so. I helped my dentist build a boat as a high school after school project. That led me to build my own boat. But I had always, where other kids were, especially boys, were into cars and girls, I was into boats and girls, I guess. But I was pretty inept with the girls part of it. So
I think Saturday Night Live wrote a song about that back in the day. Yeah. Boats and Girls, I think it was called, right, Andrew?
Yeah. So my father was an architect. Everything ties together to me in a very long, roundabout way. But my father was an architect. I grew up drawing. I was interested in boats. I'd been drawing, sort of taught myself design and celestial navigation in high school and all that kind of stuff. And so when I got out of school, I built a boat on which to live and started doing offshore voyaging and moved to Maine, and a design that I had done ended up in a magazine, and a local guy called me up and said, he had a design school and a design office near here. And so I ended up working with him off and on for about 10 years, building the school into an accredited school and working on designs. But I don't know, one thing led to another. I really loved being offshore from the first time I ever went offshore. So I wanted that to be a big part of what I did. And so I did do that. And from the time I was like, 13, I'd read some books. One was Robert Manry's Tinkerbell, and he was a copy editor in the Midwest, and had bought a town-class sloop we built right here in Maine, which is basically a 13.5-foot boat that you would sail around a lake or something, which he did with his family. And then he sailed it across the Atlantic. He decked it over, put a little cabin on it, and I was like, oh my God, that is...
You can do that?
I could do that, I could relate to that. He wasn't like some super rich guy. Adventure's there for anybody who wants to grab it. And then there was another guy who had sailed a 21-footer around the world. So, that was kind of my goal, was always to kind of live afloat. I loved the... the directness of it, the simplicity of it, almost like camping out in the wild.
Sure.
It's very similar in many ways. And so I just followed that. Whatever people would give me an opportunity to do, I would do it. rebuilt an old house here, built a house. Most of our physical belongings are kind of sweat equity, actually, from the years. And but it's not.
It's a beautiful house.
It's not any one thing. And I point out to people, like, I see the flaws in absolutely everything I do or have done. I don't consider myself a master of anything. I've known people. I've been privileged to spend a lot of time with people who are just incredibly talented at their thing. And I'm not one of those guys. I'm a good enough guy. I get involved in things to kind of understand what is involved with it, and to really appreciate those people who are real masters of it. But I guess I'm a bit of a grasshopper, jumping around from one thing to another.
I think that's a good place to be, particularly if you're like as curious and inclination motivated as like you are. Like, you're saying that you taught yourself celestial navigation in high school. I mean, like, that's like, I was like teaching myself how to like build bongs in high school and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't. And ultimately, that interest led you to some like kind of big sailing adventures. Maybe the defining one, which is the subject of the book you wrote in the '80s, Adrift. That's what we're talking about, right? The story of your 76 days lost at sea. And I said, well, I know this because I've read the book. Your kind of variation and interests all sort of played towards your ability to,
right.
Well, I mean, be here hanging out with us now.
Yeah. I went to university and was a psych and philosophy major, and my mother never understood that at all, and just the philosophy part and stuff. Yeah. And she used to say, like, don't you wish you had studied something more specific, meaning something more useful?
Right.
But actually, I find it's been incredibly useful throughout my life. Philosophy is the mother of every science, and it's a way of thinking, really, a rationality in an approach, whether you're building a house or you're sailing across the ocean or you're, I don't know, doing some genetic research or something or other. It's just a way of I'm not sure exactly how to put this. Maybe it's
contextualizing reality.
Yeah. It's a way of viewing things in a rational way that you can separate the possible and the probable and the likely and all of that. And so I always found it very useful as an approach to everything else. And I've just found everything I've done in life has been kind of a master class in whatever it is. And being adrift was a part of that. It's something that happened to me. I knew it could happen to me. I was pretty well prepared for that era. I had known I had friends who had been on the edge before at sea and doing adventuresome things, but I didn't have a life plan the way most people have in terms of like, oh, I'm going to get a job and be a banker or whatever. I can't even imagine it to me. It's just a different way of approaching things.
It's funny. It seems like you either have people that like, well, I will tell you what, like, kind of the irony is, though, you spent a lot of your life plotting very specific courses in terms of sailing. Mm-hmm. And then, like, but personally, your life seems to be like kind of like not deviations from it, but closer to that, like, it's not like wandering. Like, I don't want to say wandering.
I call it serendipity. My life has been totally ruled by serendipity. And I'll have an overall plan. I mean, I wrote down stuff when I was in college. Oh, I'm going to walk across the country and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And about 1% of those I actually did. But they give you a direction. And as I would follow that direction, things would happen. I would meet people like you, or I'd meet somebody else who was doing, my dentist, who was like, well, I'm building a boat and I know you're interested in boats, and so it's like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And sometimes it turns out to be a mistake. Sometimes it ends up being a dead end.
Been there, dude.
And yeah, exactly. We've all been there, but it's all grist for the mill, and really that serendipity has just been incredible to me. Even after adrift, 40 years after, what was it? Almost 40 years, 2010. To get a call from this Oscar-winning director Ang Lee. And says, I'm thinking about making this crazy movie. Would you be interested in talking about it? And so he talked about it, and that led to one thing to another. And I ended up, doing a lot of work on that film over a period of, a year and a half or so.
Okay, so we've talked about all this, a lot of like the pre-adrift Stephen Callahan from the maritime curious high schooler to the eventual person that's kind of building his life around sailing, whether it's working on boats, transporting boats, all these things. When did you start racing?
Oh,
or getting interested in these
Yeah, I don't know. The race was okay. Let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
From the time I was quite young, it wasn't just the ocean. I grew up in a very woodsy place, and I was very active in the Boy Scouts at that time. In fact, my Boy Scout master was kind of my sailing mentor, and we moved up through a lot of different boats together. And he would give me enough room to hang myself, basically.
Yeah.
And even when I was in high school, he would loan me his boat. He had a 25-foot boat, and he says, well, if you want to take your friends out sailing, go ahead and do it, which I would never have done to me. But anyway.
Did you take him up on it?
Yeah, sure. I started single-handing and stuff like that. Racing to me was interesting because I guess I'm a philosophical romantic in many ways, and I love the living aboard and making sailing as a lifestyle because I love wilderness environments. That's why I live in a place like this. There's something that I get from wilderness environments which is just magical to me. And so it started out on land and eventually kind of moved to the ocean.
You mean you sailed a bunch on lakes?
No.
Oh.
I started sailing on the ocean, but the thing is, I was doing camping and mountain climbing and doing all that kind of stuff.
Your love of adventure and exploration.
I just loved that. The freedom of it, but also coming with that is responsibility. It's something is a kind of a theme of mine, which is, people don't understand the real nature of freedom, which comes with equal parts of responsibility. They think, oh, well, freedom is just do whatever I want. And no, it's not. You can't do whatever you want. Go out to sea and it'll teach you very quickly that you can't just do whatever you want. You end up dead. And if you're in a society, you have responsibilities to the society. But anyway, I wanted sailing as a lifestyle, to live aboard, to be in that environment. But through that, I also got involved with some racing because that's part of the scene. And I like the racing because I'm very interested in technologies and the advancement of technologies. So that's always been a big part of my life, like writing articles and stuff like that was about leading technologies.
That's an old technology right there, that old Falcon. Look at that.
Anyway, I don't know if that even answered your question.
No, it does. I was curious about your genesis into getting into the racing stuff, and I think that answers it pretty succinctly.
Yeah, well, Napoleon Solo was a 21-foot boat I built. In the context of that, I had built a 28-foot trimaran that my first wife and I had lived aboard, but
what's a trimaran?
It's a three-hulled boat.
As soon as I asked, I started putting it together.
Yeah, like a catamaran's two-hulled boat, a trimaran's three-hulled boat, and they don't have ballast, like a ballast keel.
Can I ask you a dumb question?
Sure.
Why?
No dumb questions, just dumb answers.
Trimaran, I get that. I don't get catamaran.
You don't get a catamaran?
Well, yeah.
It comes from a Tamil word, kata and maran, which is tied logs.
Oh,
it's a very ancient word.
Yeah.
So we were living on this trimaran. My first wife was working at a sailmaker's. I was helping people build boats, and she decided she wanted to do some organic farming. So we ended up buying the piece of land in Maine to do that. But it was strained, and the relationship, and so we ended up separating. And I took the trimaran that we had and sold it and turned it into a small boat. What I wanted to show with Napoleon Solo is you could have a small boat. It's only 21 feet, about the size of an average van, say, and that you could live on it and it would give you kind of a ticket to the world. The race that I entered, the mini Transat race in England, I'd always been interested in these short-handed offshore races, starting with the Observer single-handed transatlantic race, so-called OSTAR, that started in 1960, as a simple kind of, really like a bet between friends. I can sail across the ocean faster than you, and it built into this huge thing, which is, in France now, the racing scene is fully professional. It really is equivalent to football in America or baseball.
Really?
Yeah. 500,000 people showed up to the start of a single-handed round-the-world race. And they figured 30 million people are going to follow that on TV. But in this era, in 1981, it was the very budding of that. It was more of a personal adventure. But it was also a hotbed of innovation. And a technological innovation that filtered down to average sailors, whether it's, roller furling head soles and self-tailing winches, navigation stuff, water generators, you name it. It's all been refined in this short-handed offshore racing scene.
Just as you describe where the scene was, it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the technologies that were being invented weren't the same kind of technologies that are being invented today, where it's these crazy composite materials for hulls and this really space age engineering. A lot of it is stuff that through just ingenuity, somebody who had a basic ability to work in a wood shop or lay out some design could make meaningful improvements that would kind of give an average person an entry into this kind of thing. Is that
Yeah, basically. I mean, even the evolution of the modern multi-hull, which is, trimarans, catamarans, proas, and so on. It's an ancient craft. The Pacific Islanders used multi-hulls to settle the entire Pacific Basin, while virtually all Europeans were afraid of sailing out of sight of land. And, they created these vessels that in the modern era, from the post-war era, 1950s through the 90s, I would guess, really, they were kind of ostracized by the yachting establishment. And so they were relegated to people like my dentist, who was building his own boat, right? And that's what I did. I wandered around. There were a lot of people building their own boats or rebuilding funky old wooden boats and stuff like that. So, that was kind of the background. I was interested in the countercultural element of it, and that whole evolution of the multi-hulls into all these kind of technologies you're talking about. They just have just been a really powerful source for innovation through the years. Until now, they're sailing in hydrofoils. There's an offshore racing trimaran that's done over 1,000 statute miles in 24 hours. It's under sail.
That's crazy.
That's crazy, yeah.
What was the name of the race that you were undertaking?
The Mini Transat. The OSTAR started as really sort of the mother of all these, I call them offshore adventure races, usually single-handed, double-handed across oceans. And
single-handed and double-handed is what it sounds like.
Yeah, one person per boat or two people per boat. Yep. That's it. And it's more than that. Now there are crude races and stuff too that are going around the world and everything. But that's really kind of how it started. And the Mini Transat grew out of the OSTAR. The OSTAR started getting professional. People started putting more and more money, getting sponsors, you know, big corporate sponsors in some cases. So the boats were getting bigger and much more expensive. So somebody started, this guy, Bob Salmon, started the mini Transat, which was going to limit the boats to 6.5 meters, just over 21 feet.
Okay.
And so that would keep the cost down. And so for me, it was the perfect platform. It melded together the interests I had in living simply in close contact with the natural world, and focusing on that more than, you know, having a lot of stuff. And it was very much about the experience. I was so driven from the time I was quite young into gathering experience. And I came from a upper middle class background. I had to maintain a lot of that stuff myself. And it was like, I don't want to spend all my life maintaining stuff. I want the minimal amount of stuff in order to give me the experience that I wanted. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that like that's kind of the perfect, like you were saying, race, because it's not that it lowers the barrier to entry and skill. In fact, it does the opposite, but it just allows you to compete in such an arena that you're not just going to get beat out because somebody had
a lot of money.
Exactly.
Yeah, although that's changed now because these little boats are very, very expensive now.
Things trend that way, man.
Yeah, I don't know. It's whether it's skateboarding or, you know, snowboarding or anything. They usually start off with some nutcase who says, "Hey, this is a cool idea. Why don't I try that?" And then eventually it becomes a fully professional gig. And the mini Transat's no different from that. It's like a feeder race. Now there's this whole circuit, just like auto car racing. There's a whole circuit that goes on all the time. And young sailors who are talented are now getting their, you know, earning their chops on the mini Transat boats, and then it's the Figaro race, and that before you know it, then they're skippers of these 60-foot or more round the world racers. But there's a whole training program and stuff. It's kind of like doing, I guess, I don't know, whatever it is, go-karts and NASCAR, and then you work yourself up to Formula One, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same scene.
I'm still on go-karts.
Yeah.
What?
I'm still in shopping carts.
So you are waiting for the start of the race.
Right.
With your boat, Napoleon Solo, this is kind of you testing this boat in a big way, right? Like you knew that it was a good boat. Yeah,
we had launched it the year before in Annapolis and sailed it up to Massachusetts, and we had gales in the way and stuff. When I say we, Chris Latcham, who helped me actually build the boat and sailed with me. I had single-handed the boat to Bermuda. He met me there, and we sailed the rest of the way across together. And that was the main goal, actually. It wasn't to do the mini Transat. It was to do a transatlantic on this boat.
Okay.
So once we got to England, it was like, hey, you know, childhood dreams fulfilled and yada, yada. And now I can do this race, and I'll see. It wasn't a race boat exactly. It was a liveaboard boat. I wanted to see how it would do against these all-out, you know, honed race boats that were just coming online in the mini Transat. It was the first race where they were like boats specifically designed for that race.
Where was the race from and to?
It started in Penzance, England, and it would, the first leg ran to the Canary Islands, and then the second leg goes from the Canary Islands to Antigua. Okay. It's slightly different. They've done a couple different courses since then. It leaves from France and all of that now, but that was the course at that time.
So you're in England, and you're essentially doing what it kind of reminds me of a lot of like we talked to a buddy, Tom Pollard, about Mount Everest a lot, and a lot of climbing Everest is waiting for those weather windows.
Right.
And so my understanding is you guys are all set up, and you're just waiting for this weather window.
Yeah, but We don't really wait. For those kind of races, you don't wait that much for a weather window. In fact, you go it's kind of like when I did boat deliveries. It's like you're paid to deliver a boat from here to there, and hopefully, and it's usually scheduled, and you go, and it's whatever's out there, you deal with it.
Didn't they almost cancel the race or something?
Well, there was a gale that was coming, and everybody knew it was coming. Plus, on the way over, actually, Chris and I dodged it, but we had another friend, another American guy who was going over on the race with a boat that had won the previous race. And he went north and he got run over by Hurricane Emily on the way over. And the boat got flipped upside down a bunch of times, and he's out there like on a dinghy on a lake rewriting it and all this stuff. Anyway, he got to England eventually, but he was pretty beaten up, and the boat had a bunch of damage, so he couldn't do it. Another sailor had gotten killed, a French sailor, on the way over from France, had crashed the boat against the rocks and died. But generally, you don't really want to start in a hurricane exactly, but because it was a forecast gale, it's like, guess what? This is basically, I could call it a month-long race or something or other. Guess what? You're going to see a gale.
Yeah.
I can't remember ever crossing the Atlantic without seeing gales. So it was like, no, that's just part of the scene.
Do you remember what it was like the first, like not in this race, but the first time you had ever experienced being out in big, big water like that?
Oh,
like what's that like for the? Because I've never been in something
probably
like that.
74 when I got married to my first wife, and we built this 28-foot trimaran that we were living on, and we set off on our wedding voyage. It should have been a sign right there, I guess. And we went outside Cape Cod, got hit with this unseasonable gale kind of thing, and they were pretty big waves, and it was pretty scary. Yeah, getting down, finally got our way into Nantucket, which was amazing that we even got there without wrecking the boat and ourselves.
But what do you do when that happens? I mean, do you just like drop the sail, batten down the hatches?
No,
like,
no. I mean, sometimes you might want to do that, but
I don't sail. I have no idea.
It depends on. Every boat has its own personality. It deals with things in different ways, and it has its strengths and its weaknesses, and you get to know those. So how do you adjust that? The conditions and where you're located have a lot to do with your choices and how to manage the things. You know, I mean, if you're close to the coast, you got to really pay attention. If you're in the middle of the ocean, okay, then you're dealing with, you know, okay, what are the waves like? What are the wave shapes like? What is the forecast going to be? How do I manage the boat? What's its capabilities? Do I heave to? Do I run down? You know, that kind of thing. If you're close to the coast, it's like, well, I would love to run off and run down the waves, but I'm going to hit the coast in 20 miles here. I can't do that. It's too dangerous. So it's really it's a more complicated thing than, I'm just going to do this or I'm just going to do that.
Right. Is it more stable if you're moving?
Generally speaking, I find that keeping sailing, and that's one of the things that these shorthanded races has shown, I feel like definitively, is that you're better moving and in control of the boat and the boat speed than sitting still and just getting whacked. It's not always true, and it depends on the type of boat and whatnot. There are times where you might want to just sit still, put out a sea anchor, you know, the big bag that drags through the water and gives you some control over where you're facing the waves and stuff like that. But generally speaking, I find it easier and to go with the flow. Don't fight nature so much. Figure out what nature wants to do and see how you can fit into it as best you can.
We're back to the philosophy, philosophy studies. What, okay, so you're not really waiting for the weather window. You're kind of waiting for the weather window at the start of the race.
Well, they would have canceled it, but they said, okay, this is going to be the conditions and we're going to start the scheduled start. So that's what we
And they're just like, if you want to do it, go for it. They're just like, go. Okay.
Yeah. And people in the crowd are sitting there going, oh, I don't really want to, start in these conditions, but that's the way it's going to be.
Did you have any apprehension?
I always have apprehension.
I mean, specifically related to the conditions.
I wasn't too wild about
You weren't like, this is a great day to go sailing.
Well, the start actually was fine. It was going to be like within the next, 24, 48 hours. And, that would take us down. We're crossing the Bay of Biscay, which is notorious, and that kind of thing. So, no, I wasn't too happy about it. But it was like, well, that's the way it is. And so we're going.
So you're out. The race has begun. You're not feeling great about the conditions. However, you are internalizing them as part of sailing and something that is just sort of, it's literally a course, right? So par for the course.
Yeah.
What are the first few days like?
For me, always going offshore the first few days is, frankly, well, not the first trip, but thereafter it was like, tell me again, why am I doing this? I have a drawer full of T-shirts. I've been here before. I know what this is. It was like, tell me why I'm doing this. But inevitably, it kind of ends up being the same thing. By the time you get into the rhythm of it, and you're in this incredible environment, the world's greatest wilderness, right there. Mm. And covers 2/3 of the planet and gives you access to most of the planet, really. And it's beautiful and it's unpredictable, and it's, even though for a lot of people it looks the same all the time, not to me. To me, it's ever changing. And you got these fluid, and amazing things happen. Animals will appear out of nowhere. There's a whale. I'm looking down into the whale spout right there, right next to the boat. Pretty cool stuff, really.
Cool stuff.
Big sharks, or the bird life is just incredible. It's just a different world, and so by the time you get into this rhythm of it, and you've seen all these things, and you get to the other end, it's like, that was pretty cool. When can we do that again? Even though in the first few days you're going, what on earth was I thinking? And I find that about a lot of experiences. Survival and being adrift. A very common question is like, do you regret that or whatever? And it's like, no. And I have talked to survivors of all kinds of things through the years. And I have to say, if it's not a universality, it's a commonality that none of us would replace that part of our lives, that we get. Even in extreme adversity, why people climb Everest or do these things, you gain things that you could only gain in that way. And it leads you down roads that gives you opportunities, ways of seeing things in life that you could not have had without that kind of an experience. And now it might have been painful. I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
I don't want to starve again. I don't want to be covered with saltwater sores. I don't want to lose 1/3 of my weight starving. And I don't want to, just be totally beaten up the way I was in a life raft. But it has given me so much over the years, and it's irreplaceable. And a voyage is like a little part of that. I say, life is a survival experience.
Yeah.
And when you go to sea or you're climbing a mountain or whatever, it's kind of like an enhanced experience, survival experience in a way.
Yeah. I'm sure that all like the listeners right now are hearing this perspective that it's giving you, are like hearing us kind of like dance around the opening acts to this thing.
Okay. You want me to summarize it? I'll summarize the entire thing and very quickly.
Okay.
I fulfilled my childhood dreams by crossing the Atlantic in a small, simple boat.
Uh-huh.
I started the mini Transat race. We get to, but I drop out because I have some damage on the boat. So I started to cruise, but I'm still following.
No. I want to be there. I want to talk about this. I want to.
Okay.
Will you tell the story?
Yeah, but let me finish the summary.
Okay.
So I leave the Canary Islands, have a dreamy, unusual week of beautiful sailing, and I'm just like exercising and reading my books and all of that, just fantastic. And you rarely get that, especially in the northern part of the North Atlantic, because you're always getting slammed by gales and stuff. And it got about a week out, and a gale was brewing up, pretty big waves, not probably 10 feet, 10, 12 feet, something like that, significant wave height. And but I wasn't too worried. The boat and I had been through a lot at this point. And suddenly, bam, something seems to have hit the side of the boat. It looks like a World War II submarine diving with the hatches open. Yeah. You know, just water just like coming in like crazy. I bail out into a life raft, which is a couple of big like inner tubes, one stacked on the other with a tent across the top. And I spend the next 2.5 months learning to live like an aquatic caveman.
An aquatic caveman.
Yeah, that's the story.
That's a really good way to
That's a story in a nutshell, because that's exactly what it was like. I considered it my cave. I have like a little entry thing, and I would crawl in the cave and look out my entry opening into the world. And I was kind of semi-safe within the cave. And I was living about as a rudimentary existence as you could possibly get, and spearing fish and producing a little bit of water, just enough water to survive, and doing a lot of repairs.
The night that you started having trouble, it wasn't that gale when you left. You got to Antigua, or not Antigua, you got to...
Marie Galante is where I landed. Yeah, it's just off of Guadalupe, a little island off of Guadalupe. But I'd stopped in the Canary Islands and spent, I don't know, a couple of months there before pushing off.
You push off, you're sailing for like a week?
Yeah, about a week, 8 days, I think.
It's the middle of the night. What happens?
Rolling along, wind's picking up. Fair amount of seaway, probably, I guess the significant wave height was about, a few meters, 10 feet, 12 feet maybe. And, but I was just kind of reaching across them and doing fine. I had just a storm jib up, and everything seemed in control.
What's a storm jib?
A storm jib's a little jib, a small bit of sail for the storm. And so I thought I was pretty secure, and just kind of rolling along, and I kept getting up and looking around. One thing about sailing offshore is you try to be as preemptive as possible. You're always checking what might go wrong, and everything looked fine. So I finally took off all my clothes stupidly, except a t-shirt, and laid down, and then, I don't know, probably around midnight local time, bam, and there's like water coming into the boat very fast.
What do you think happened?
I think I was probably T-boned by a whale. I'd been around, I'd hit a whale a couple of years before in broad daylight. They're very hard to see. It's like a log adrift, Sure. A little bit is up, but if you're in any kind of a seaway, half the time they're underwater, or most of it is anyway. So, and my theory is that whales do collide with boats on fairly regular basis, in part because sailboats don't make much noise.
Oh, that's a good point.
Especially compared to breaking waves. I was in these large breaking waves,
Sure.
I mean, what's my boat doing is like making almost no noise, and it's whales swimming around, making,
that whale just is like I bumped my head on the kitchen cabinet,
Exactly. So, I don't know. I think that's probably what happened. I mean, it could have been a big shark. It could have been, I don't know, something else, I guess. But I felt like it was like, I don't know, just the movement of it, kind of to weather towards the wind, which would
so
be
you
unusual,
weren't asleep when this happened? Where you were just kind of lying there?
Sleeping is really weird for me offshore, single-handed.
Yeah.
I can be dreaming, actively dreaming, but being aware, consciously aware of things in the surroundings, the sounds, the feeling, and something changes. The rhythm of the boat changes, or there might be a sound that's coming through the hull, and I would wake up and it was like look out and go, oh, there's a ship over there. You can hear the props from miles away sometimes.
Yeah.
Or the rhythm of the boat's changed. Oh, well, that's because the wind changed and the sails aren't set properly, and that kind of thing. So I was in that stage.
Do you think that's an experience unique to you? Or
I don't know.
Do other sailors?
Other sailors have talked about splitting, this kind of psychological splitting, where let's say you're laying down and it's like the last thing you want to do is get up on deck and deal with the problem. So there's that part of you that's just like, oh God, just leave me alone. And then there's this Captain Bligh that comes along and slaps you around a bit and says, get the hell up there and do your thing, you know? And these can get very strained over time. And it's actually a central theme in Adrift. This state of our psyche, which is not single dimensional, it's multidimensional. And we often, you know, ask questions like, what do you think about this? Or what do you feel about this? And if you really look into it, you know, almost always, if not always, you actually have mixed feelings about it, or you have, you know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so like in the boat's going down, filling with water, and there's a part of me that's totally freaked. And, oh my God, this is, you know I know I might have thought about this before, but I never
now
really
it's
thought it was,
happening,
now
yeah.
it's actually happening, and I'm probably going to die within the next hour, if not sooner.
You thought like that from the jump?
Oh God, yeah. And then there's a part of me that's just like whiny, 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 and it's like, shut the hell up, you know,
Right.
just get out of my face. And that part of me that I dealt with anytime, if you've had any substantive experience in the wilderness and especially offshore, you fix things all the time. You're dealing with stuff all the time. And so it's always kind of a situation where you're being trained to be independent and to face problems and sort it out. So there's that part of me that's going through my training and what I need to do. And there was even a part of me, I get up on the deck and I had a movie camera, old Super 8 movie camera that was rigged up on the boat that I could turn on and off. And
did you think about
the electrical system had fused together or something or other, and I could see that it was taking these really dramatic pictures, and I found that incredibly amusing. So I had all these things going on in me at that time, and even as time went on through the voyage, this splitting into sort of multiple parts of myself, I kind of abstracted it in the book as a physical and an emotional and a rational part of me, and they all had different needs. Competing needs and desires. And so there was always this battle going on within myself. And you see the same thing when people are in survival situations with groups, where they might be symbolic about, you know, their varying needs and desires.
Assuming a role in the collective psyche.
Yeah. But even within those situations, if you really, I don't know, look into those personalities and what they're thinking at a time and whatnot, it's like, a lot of times they have really mixed feelings about it. Like for me, it was, you know, as time went on, I'm living on these fish that were kind of spiritual creatures to me, really, and really symbolic of the magic and the mystery and the grandeur of the natural world. You know, that emotional part of me didn't want to catch a fish. It was like if you were with a bunch of companions and you know, well, I'm going to kill my companion so we can eat tomorrow. Yeah. Or you know, people relate to their pets. Well, if you had to, you know, eat your dog tomorrow, you'd probably have some not great
hard feelings about
it.
That. Boone, I will never do that to you, buddy. Weller, you might get it.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the scene.
Did you
total chaos?
I'm kind of like fascinated though, because I mean, pretty much nobody goes through 76 days at sea and gets out of it at the end. Like that doesn't happen almost ever.
But
in the context of the amount of people.
Yeah, it does happen on occasion. You know, afterwards, you know, I kept getting a question you were asking me about, questions I get that I think are kind of funny or whatever. Yeah. And the inevitable question, as soon as I landed, all these people from the press would call me up and then they go, "Is this a record? Is this a record?" I said,
"Oh, really?" You're like, "I wasn't keeping track."
It's not a sporting event. That's what I told them. It's just not, right? And even if it was, you would have to do qualifiers. Now I've talked to all kinds of survivors, including oceanic survivors, and everyone is totally unique, and you cannot compare one to the other in any way, shape, or form.
Of course.
And I mean, you can, but it's kind of irrelevant. And I've talked to people who've had survival experiences, oceanic survival experiences of a week that I consider every bit as intense as the one that I had over 2.5 months. But if I have a record, it's the longest survival alone in an inflatable raft. Okay, because the Baileys, an English couple, were 119 days adrift in the Pacific about 10 years before me. They had 2 rafts. They had a life raft like mine and a dinghy.
And then a vacation home.
And they were together, right? There was Poon Lim during the Second World War, who was 133 days adrift, but he had a solid raft off of a ship, right? So it does happen. And since my drift, of course, there have been others.
The reason that I'm asking, I mean, number one, like that is like, if we're like contextualizing things on scope, like it's interesting, but primarily it's fascinating to me that like a survival effort that focused and that successful started with the thought, I'll probably be dead in the next hour.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were saying like that's kind of part of what you were thinking on the ship?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff going on. I mean, didn't necessarily say it in my head in those words, but that was very present. That this very well could be the end.
But it wasn't. So
it wasn't.
What happens on this boat that is going down? This is Napoleon Solo. Also, like, this is like a weird reference, Andrew. I think like you'll get it for sure, and I think you might get it too. But anybody born after like 94 won't get it at all. You ever seen that movie, The Never-Ending Story?
Oh, I'm not sure if I have.
Have you seen that?
I think so.
Well, there's a scene in the beginning where this like kid, his like magic horse gets stuck in the mud, and it's like a canon traumatic movie event. It's like Old Yeller getting capped or something.
Oh yeah,
That's kind of how I felt about the description of Napoleon Solo sinking. It was this like kind of, did you?
Oh, you get incredibly attached.
Okay, that's sort of what I was.
Yeah. I mean, this was, my whole dream, taking this boat across the Atlantic, and, I designed it, I built it, we sailed it. There's a very unique relationship between sailors and their boats. You depend upon one another so much. They become kind of like the way I feel about it is when you're off on a boat, is like you're the brains of the beast. Or an orchestrator of wind, wave, and machine. They all go together. It's definitely not an inanimate object. It's a very much animate object, and you get attached to it. It was my home. It was quite a lot for me. So it was very hard for me after I lost the boat and was actually drifting off to go through a period, we sometimes refer to this period as recoil, which is you've escaped the immediate threat. Now what? And the recoil period is really difficult because you've kind of flushed your old life down the toilet, and it's like, well, how do I possibly, even though I know, I've read the Baileys, I've read Robertsons, I've read all these people, I know it's doable.
There are things
but how can I do this? It's so overwhelming that you're just swamped by it. And during that period of time, I would just and this lasted for roughly 2 weeks for me, I just mercilessly beat up on myself.
What could I have done different?
I was a failure at my marriage. I was a failure at human relationships. I was a failure at business. I was a failure at building the boat. I was a failure at all these things.
And now I'm on this fucking life raft.
Exactly. It's like, what kind of a friggin' idiot could you possibly be that would be worse than this? And it takes a while to, well, I have certain ways of dealing with things, but in kind of strategies overall. And one is to hang on to whatever you can that still exists. Normalize life as much as possible. Create routines if your old routines have been, kind of totally displaced. Things like that. And overall, the number one thing is denial is the number one enemy. and take things one achievable step at a time rather than focusing on the overwhelming goal of crossing, 2/3 of the Atlantic in a rubber ducky, which is what I named my raft, of course.
What did you grab? The boat's going down. What did you grab off the boat? Well, once you realized that you had to bail onto this raft, you made a couple trips back and forth between the Napoleon, which is, obviously in the process of sinking. What'd you grab?
Well, Napoleon Solo kind of stabilized because I had watertight compartments in the boat designed to really for collision protection.
I feel like the Titanic did that.
Yeah, they did do that. Yeah,
any boat designers out there, maybe don't.
No, it actually saved my ass because the way the boat went down, by the time I'm bailing out of the boat, the whole bow of the boat is definitively underwater.
Sure.
Feet underwater. But the stern, the way it went down that way, the stern had come up, and between the watertight compartments and an airlock that had formed in the back, it kept the boat actually afloat. Now, every wave was like basically sweeping across the whole boat. So it was virtually impossible to stay aboard.
Yeah.
But it gave me a chance because I had a ditch kit, a bag full of all kinds of gear that would become critical to my survival. There was some gear in the raft, but standard gear bags in rafts are basically designed for short term. Most people are picked up within 48 hours or so. And so even though I had this gear in the raft, there's no way I would have survived without more gear from the boat. And I had all kinds of stuff I didn't get to, but I made some trips and dove down into the boat and pulled out a piece of cushion so I'd have some insulation.
Are you actually diving down? Like when you say dove down the boat, are you?
Yeah, I'm sliding the hatch forward and the boat is basically full of water. Now there's an airlock back there somewhere, but I basically go down and it's pitch black. I can't see a thing, so it's all feely about what I can actually grab and get loose. But I got my ditch kit, which had all this gear. I got a sleeping bag, a piece of cushion, and after all that, I was so exhausted, I can't tell you. And I was just like laying around in the raft, hanging on, because it was like being tied to the boat, which is really stable in the water. It was like being in an auto accident every few minutes. Being, this big breaking wave would hit the raft and like crush it, all this water would come pouring in, and I'd be squeezed in between the tubes, and it was really pretty much a nightmare for a while. And that gale would end up lasting about 3 days. But just before, I don't know, sometime before dawn, several hours anyway, a wave hit the raft, and I was tied to the boat with this line, and something gave way, and I went drifting off. And so then it was like, oh, well, guess what? Now that's it. And like every single thing that happens, there's a dichotomy, a kind of a black and white side of it, a yin-yang side of it, because I was very worried that if I'd stayed tied to the boat, that these breaking waves would actually tear the raft apart, which has happened. And if that happened, then forget about it. I'm done. On the other hand, if I could have stayed tied to the boat, I could have gone, when daylight comes, I can go get 5-gallon jug of water, which is like 40 days of survival ration. It just would have been fantastic. But as it turns out, it probably was the best thing for me to get broken away from the boat.
The first day, how long were you like, as soon as you became untethered, were you like lost sight of Napoleon Solo in a matter of?
Oh, minutes.
Minutes, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I could see it over on its side. It kept tilting more and more on the mast on its side. And, waves, I see a little bit, and then gone. Yeah. I wasn't like I was totally focused on that anyway.
Sure.
I was basically holding on for dear life because
it's still storming.
It's still storming. It's going to storm for 3 days and in pretty big waves. And, you know, you're in an inflatable little raft. And although it had ballast pockets on the bottom that scoop up seawater to help
give you
keep some stability, it's like, well, every once in a while, you know, the raft gets basically almost overthrown and all this water comes gushing in. I'm in danger of losing equipment, and it's cold enough. There was snow on the islands and the Canaries in the mountainsides when I left. So the water temperature and, well, the air temperature was probably, I want to say probably in maybe 50 degrees or something, but blowing hard.
Oh,
and
I had no idea.
You're totally wet. And I'm not in the Caribbean yet. The Canaries are, even though they're off the coast of Africa there, the water it's not like 80 degrees or 90 degrees.
Yeah, I'm like totally geographically challenged. So like, for whatever reason, I just heard the Canary Islands. I was like,
yeah, they're pretty warm overall if you can stay dry. But if you're wet and it's windy and all of that, I mean, hypothermia is a real issue. So
sure.
For the first half of the voyage, staying warm during the night was a challenge. And then the second half of the voyage, as I'm drifting further towards the Caribbean and things are getting hotter and hotter, staying cool enough during the day was a major issue.
So you're getting just bucked around by this storm in like torturous, like really like kind of torturous like conditions. It's freezing.
Well, yeah.
Not literally freezing.
It could have been worse. Everything could have been worse in a lot of ways. I was very lucky that a lot of things happen in not just my own experience, but a lot of survival experiences where you look back and you go, God, if that had just been a little bit different, I wouldn't be here. And there's piles and piles of these things. So if it was a little bit colder, I probably wouldn't be here. If I had had somebody else with me, I wouldn't be here because probably we both would have died of
you wouldn't have been able to.
We wouldn't have. I wouldn't have had enough water for
right.
two people. There's so many things. Like I say, I kind of look at everything as sort of having this yin-yang balance. It is exactly what it is. I don't care what you feel about it. I don't care what you think about it. It is exactly what it is, and your best strategy is to figure out what that is and try to appreciate that balance. That is like, okay, that's a negative, that's not good, but this might be a positive that comes out of it, or whatever.
I don't like exercising. It makes me tired. It hurts like my muscles for 2 days, but like it's what's ultimately going to give me longevity to like.
And so I did stuff like that. I immediately, I said, okay, this isn't the end of a voyage. It's just a continuation on a more humble craft.
Okay.
And so what's important to do? I get up in the morning and I do my navigation as best I can. I keep a log. I figure out what are the best times of day to fish. How do I produce water? How do I prioritize every day? What is the most important thing to pay attention to and focus on that? And then, you have other priorities, and of course, if the raft goes, I ain't going anywhere.
Yeah,
so the raft is like the top priority. But beyond that, in terms of physical survival, there's injury, which you can't really do much about if you're in a raft. There's very little you can do. If you got a major injury, you're kind of toast. Then there's hypothermia, which can kill you in minutes. Yeah. And then there's water, and lastly, food. Mm. So you get down to these like real basics, actually. But even though they're real basic, to solve that problem is quite complicated.
So you're just kind of getting brutalized by this storm for a couple of days.
Yeah.
The storm breaks, and you are able, I would imagine, for the first time to like meaningfully triage the situation.
Yeah, because up until that time, I was kind of hanging on.
But you can look through stuff.
I was looking through, I had the inventory, and like I said, I start doing some things. I'm taking notes when I can, have things dry enough. But
in that first day, like, the first day that you're able to like kind of have some dominion over your thing without waves,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I guess they're still there for sure a little bit, but like without the constant demand of attention that like a storm warrants. Can you tell me, like, it doesn't have to be like a list like kind of thing, but more or less what you had in that kit?
Oh God, yeah, it's actually pretty extensive.
I remember being like surprised at how extensive it was, but also kind of surprised at some of like the choices that whoever put that kit together made.
Yeah, well, I had my own ditch kit.
Yeah.
And the one in the Raft is standard. You know, there's some cans of water and a collapsible bucket, which really is like kind of a useless thing, frankly.
I've always called those bags.
Yeah. I mean, in the life raft itself, I had a coffee can that came floating out of the I grabbed them, and that was very useful because I could push my knees down into the floor and have a low spot so I could actually bail water out and stuff like that. I had flares. The raft itself had some flares. It had a couple of solar stills that would produce most of my fresh water, about a pint a day, just enough. In my own kit, I had another solar still. I had paper, pencils. I often talk about, you know, my favorite inventions of humankind are you know, writing stuff, paper, pencils, line or rope, and knives. With those, you can build a whole kingdom. And so that was always my like basic tools, raw materials, things like that. I had little squares of plywood for use as a cutting board. I had grabbed a piece of sail off of the boat. I cut it off before I got separated from the boat. I had this horseshoe ring that I grabbed off the boat, which is, you know, if somebody falls overboard, you throw it to them. So that I cut in half and put little notes on it and set them adrift, like messages in a bottle saying who I was and where I lost the boat and all that, in case somebody might trip over them. I don't know what else. Oh, and a shorty spear gun that I'd bought in the Canary Islands. It's really, I mean, you've seen it. It's on my wall. It's not. It's pretty tiny. It's almost like a toy.
Yeah.
It's not like one of these big giant things. And I figured, well, you know, it might be useful. I get to the Caribbean, I can eat off of this. And Napoleon Solo being such a small boat, it only had sitting headroom, and I'd try putting it in different places in the boat, and I kept hitting my head on it, and I said, that's no good. And finally, it just sneaked into my gear bag, kind of catty corner. So I'm really glad I had that, because that fed me essentially 90% of what I ate. I don't know, bunches of flares and kind of a whole arsenal of flares, really, but they would do me no good.
Did you have any, I can't remember, did you have any potable water with you those first few days?
Yeah, cans of water. I think I had 6 pints or 8 pints. I can't remember now, actually. It's been a long time.
But negligible. I mean, like, it's like a week's worth of water.
Yeah,
maybe
basically.
Any like food, like biscuits, or like any sort of like...
I had some stuff packed in my bags, in my bag. There weren't any ship's biscuits or any survival food like that in the kit, but I grabbed a half a little cabbage that came floating out of the
I remember that.
The cabin. An egg came floating out. I grabbed that and threw it in the raft. And I was like, that was toast in about 10 seconds. You know, stuff like that. But I had a can of beans, actually, that I ended up throwing overboard because the can had blown out. Some peanuts and a couple other things. I can't remember what else was in there.
So you're in,
but not much.
It is a pretty spare.
Yeah.
When we talked earlier, just like a minute ago, you were talking about that recoil and that feeling like kind of like a self-loathing.
Yeah, and it's more than that. It's just to try to come to grips with overcoming the challenge is so overwhelming. You just think, you know, most people anyway, even if they're pretty tough and resilient people, it's like if they get into a situation like this, it's like, I don't see any way out of this. I just can't. I can't see myself being resilient enough and adaptable enough in order to make it through this. Because you really can't. You know what all the challenges are, but you don't know what the answers are to facing those at the time. And sometimes it takes a really long time to figure things out.
Did you ever feel like you kind of deserved to be there on some level?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. It's like, well, this is what you get for such a misspent life, you know. I think inevitably that happens to people, but
what's that like?
It's dismal. It's depressing. I mean, it's just really hard to overcome the I don't know, the anxiety and the depression and these kind of feelings. But eventually you do, and you do things. I often talk to people about, you know, the experiences, you know, as we like to say, it's life on steroids. It's the same as everyday life. We face challenges and so on. It's just that it's much more intense. And so you have these feelings that are really intensified, and you'll have these really low lows. And then something happens. You make a little discovery. You figure out how to solve a problem, and all of a sudden you're like the king of the world. Just ecstasy. Yeah. And you know, okay, fine, maybe I'm going to die tomorrow, but look what I've achieved. And actually, in the documentary that this guy made of Adrift, and he because I reference this, it's like in survival films, Castaway with Tom Hanks. There's just this great scene where he's struggling to make a fire. And then he's dancing around the fire. Look what I have achieved. It's exactly like that. It really is incredible. But then it could be 10 minutes later, I hold the bottom of the raft, and it's like, oh, now what? Now you idiot. You know, how could you possibly, I don't know, overcome this? So it's very high highs and very low lows. But in the zone in general, I mean, I think a lot of sports people can relate to this. You know, I've talked to survivors of mountain climbing who've fallen off of cliffs and lost legs and stuff like that. And when we talk about these things, and we really relate on this issue, and it's the same as just the offshore sailing. It's a very Zen-like experience. You're almost totally in the present. You know, the past and the future are, you know, they're out there, but you're so focused, and you can be in the zone if you're getting good at it. And so you're totally present, and you're really sensitive to everything that's going on around you, and what everything you do, how it has an effect on everything else, and so in many ways it's a kind of strange high too.
In those early days, I have two questions. I'm just going to kind of layer them on top of each other. One, with your limited consumable supplies, that being like, you know, the peanuts, the cans of water. One, how quickly did you or did you not use those? And then two, for the first 3 weeks, because like I would assume that that's like maybe how long it took you to get into, well, I also kind of know, but like a meaningful rhythm. Yeah. What is day-to-day life like for those first 20 days, say?
Yeah, actually for me it was 2 weeks, really, almost exactly 2 weeks.
That was the acclimation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put a quick, you know, a really clear dividing line on it, but
of course.
It took me 2 weeks to figure out how to get one of these solar stills to work, because as far as I know, I'm the only one to have ever gotten one to work in the real world.
Really?
They were made during the Second World War. I've talked to lots of vets. I've read books that mention them and stuff like that. I've never heard of anybody getting one to work in the real world. I'm sure they worked in a pool someplace at some point.
It seems like a great idea.
It's a great idea.
You never hear somebody being like, and then this solar still came in a ton of handy, worked exactly as it was supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. And then the only way I got them to work was used as not directed. So, you know, anyway, it took me a long time to sort that out.
Can you describe a solar still for
Solar still is like it's like a balloon.
Okay.
And it's got a little valve on the top that allows seawater to drip down inside. And then it's an atmosphere on the inside. It's got a black cloth suspended on the inside of this balloon. And then when the sun comes out, it evaporates the fresh water out of the seawater, and which basically collects as condensation on the balloon and then rains down to a collection bag. Sounds very simple, but the valve has to be just right. The inflation has to be just right. If it's floating in the water as directed, a wave passes by and it zooms off and then comes at the end of a tether and goes doing like that and flings all kinds of salt water into the fresh water and tears itself. So it took me a long time to kind of sort my way through that and figure out how I could actually get one to work. So that's part of the day. Keeping a log, navigating, exercising. I had problems with my back, and so I was doing these kind of modified yoga exercises every day. And then fish started showing up on the third day, and so they were my source. And actually, the story of adrift to me is, it's really a fishtail. And the fish, the Dorado, mahi, whatever you want to call them, they're the stars of the show. I'm just this idiot who's out there showing the worst possible way to cross the Atlantic. And they've got the ecosystem that develops around the raft, of which they are the stars, is what long-term oceanic survivors depend upon. Anything that floats in the ocean becomes an island. It can be a little square of styrofoam and it'll grow weeds and barnacles, and fish will park under them.
And this starts to happen day 3 of this 14-day period.
Yeah, they start showing up and then they get closer and closer, and I'm trying to spear them, and they prove to be way smarter than me and way faster, and they're out there. I mean, through the whole thing, I'm looking at them and going, hey, you know, they're out there making love and having fun, and I'm dying. Who's the superior being here? Right. You know? And so it took me a long time to figure out how to fish. And on the 14th day, I'd gotten a solar still to work, and I caught my first Dorado. I believe that was the Dorado I caught the 14th day.
Are your cans of water gone at this point?
Yeah. Yeah,
Food
pretty
gone?
much.
The peanuts gone at this point?
Pretty much. Yeah. I didn't eat them right away because I figured, oh well, I'm not going to starve in a day or two. You don't really starve. Most people won't starve to death for several weeks at the very least, maybe a month. So that wasn't a huge priority, and not that I enjoyed being hungry, but.
Did you start fishing as soon as you saw the fish?
Yeah, I tried doing several things. I tried catching them with a piece of line. They just bit the line off. Then I found I had a piece of wire that I could use as a leader. And at this point, like, a flying fish crashed into the raft, right? And it's like, I'm not going to throw the flying fish away. I'm going to eat that. Mm-hmm. But I saved the head and the tail and stuck them together with some hooks and stuff in them and made a lure. Threw it out. Okay, they just bite that off. All right, make another one with a wire leader. I catch another one, and it just suddenly swims. These fish can do 50 knots.
Oh, yeah.
So it just suddenly swims really fast forward and clips the line off right in front of where the leader is. And then they would tease me because I'd be trying to catch them with shoot them with the spear gun. And they learned within 24 hours what exactly the range of that spear gun was.
Oh, really?
And they would go, like, just tease me. But they would hit the bottom of the raft in different ways. And we're not sure why they do this behavior, but some people say, oh, it's to get rid of, pests on their skins and stuff like that. We don't really know, but they certainly seem to enjoy it. And so I'd be out front of the raft, with my little opening to the raft. And, and they come up and sneak attack me in the back, and and really, and these big males they can be, the largest one I caught was pretty close. It stretched all the way across the raft, so pretty close to 6 feet long, and it just about beat me to death.
Yeah.
And plus, I'm in a inflated raft with a spear sticking through this thing, trying to keep it under control. So it's all kind of
high anxiety,
freaky. And so I tried to stick to the littler. The littler females, but when these big males would come up and hit the bottom of the raft, if I had just laid my head on the bottom of the raft, it'd be just like if I just like really whacked you.
Yeah.
And so I always kept my head up on a gear bag and stuff like that. And
how long was it until, because you had sharks?
Yeah, I had some sharks.
Bop in the bottom of that thing.
Yeah, I was fortunate compared to survivors in the Pacific with sharks. I mean,
well, yeah,
some of whom I know basically have to learn to live with sharks around them all the time, 24/7. I had encounters. I can't remember exactly how many, but the first was I saw a hammerhead, and of course I was freaked out. Frankly, I wasn't as freaked out about being eaten right away. What I was really worried about was them damaging the raft.
When was this first shark encounter? Do you remember?
I can't remember what day it was. Sometime in that first couple of weeks.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm seeing it swim up to me, and I'm trying to be weightless, and it just kind of glided under the raft and just went on its own merry way. But there were others where they would come up, and one of them, it was what I call the afternoon bake-off, the second half of the voyage, where I was just wanting to pass out because it was so hot. And all of a sudden I'm awakened by the whole raft's going like this, and a shark was upside down, grabbed one of the ballast pockets and was doing this with the raft.
Oh my gosh.
And there are other times where they would hit in the second week, actually, the first ship that I saw, this 14th day, I think it was on the 14th day or around then, I was awakened immediately. All of a sudden, there was, the Dorado would gather around the raft, and at night I'd get up and I'd look at them, and anything going through the water disturbs the planktonic bioluminescence, and so they glow. Yeah. So it was like I'd get up and it was like being surrounded by these incredible, silver platters or something or other. But a shark, I think, had seen one of the Dorado under the raft and came up to grab the Dorado, and all of a sudden the raft's being punched off the water, and it took a number of swings, and I'm trying to hit at these flashes of bioluminescence.
Just get it to go away.
It went away, yeah. But later that same night, there was a disturbance, another Dorado, I think it was, and it woke me up, and I looked out, and there was a ship. So I had this fantasy of the ship was going to pick me up in a couple of weeks before anybody even knew I was missing, and I had this Dorado that I just killed, and I was going to share that with the crew. And I'm drinking water and going, "Hey, this is great," What a frigging idiot! It just went steaming right by, woo!
So
into the sunset.
You had two devices by which you hope to attract attention from, either ships or, I guess, planes.
I had a thing called an EPIRB, an emergency position indicating radio beacon, which is they come someplace. Some versions of it are called PLBs, personal locating beacons. All little aircraft and stuff have these things. And at the time, they were only being monitored by aircraft that were within, I think it was 250 miles or something like that.
Okay.
But I was in a very empty part of the Atlantic Ocean, so that never brought help.
And then your other method of
there were flares.
Yeah.
And I had a pile of flares. Parachute flares that go up and they pop open a little parachute as they drift down, so they stay up quite a lot longer. They're the best. And I thought the ship had seen me. It seemed like it had maybe changed course, but it just came steaming right by.
How many flares do you think you had, and how many flares did you spend on that first ship?
I can't remember the number that I had total, actually, or even how many I used on that ship, because I used 2 or 3 parachute flares, I think, and then some handheld flares and stuff. And when it went by, and after drinking the water and using these flares, I really...
Oh, the drinking the water wasn't part of your fantasy? Like you...
No, I actually drank some water. I drank probably a pint and a half or 2 pints of water, and it was like, that took me so long to stockpile. And it was like, oh my God, it was just another one of those moments where, you're just like beating yourself up for being such an idiot.
Well, you used a bunch of your resources, whether it's like, the flares to signal help or the water. And how far away was this boat from you at its closest, would you think?
Less than a mile. I could smell the diesel in the air. And I could, it sets up a wake, and I could feel the wake under the raft when they came out. So
I mean, like, that's like across the bay. Actually, across the bay is probably a little further.
No, I would say it might have been closer than that. Than that house over there, or something like that. But another ship that passed me by, if somebody had been out on deck, I could have told you what kind of clothes they were wearing, but it didn't see me.
And these are tankers. These are large.
Yeah, freighters, tankers, offshore stuff, and the reality. I knew what the reality was. I mean, I'd been offshore enough and talked to ship on radios, and a lot of times you're on a big boat and talking to a ship on the radio, and they go, "Where are you?" And I go, "Well, I'm bearing this degree from you," and they go, "Really? I can't see you." And I'm in a 40-foot sailboat, and you can't see me, and if there's somebody, in the middle of the night, maybe somebody's on the bridge, and more likely just sitting in the radio room, in 15 minutes, even if they come out and look in your direction, they're gone, so it's just one of those things.
What is that like when a boat passes, like,
Well, the first one was tough, but mostly it was tough because I really admonished myself for being foolish. And it's like, again, it's like reality is exactly what it is, not what you want it to be. I wanted to be, have this fantasy fulfilled and I would be saved. But the reality was you never know when you're going to be saved until you are saved. Don't ever jump the gun, because that's when you make big mistakes.
How do you come back from that?
You forgive yourself and move on. I knew that too. I went through that all with myself in the raft. First of all, I'm by myself. I have nobody else to bounce stuff.
In the first 14 days, this is?
Well, yeah, really throughout the whole thing. Thing. I had to kind of keep repeating these mantras. Forgive yourself if you made a mistake. You don't even know how many mistakes you're making. Not to mention all the missed opportunities that you could have, exploited had there been somebody smarter than you with you, that kind of thing. But you can only do the best you can. And I knew from the very first day, I wrote that in my log about, look, you say this often in your life that, you got to do the best you can, but I'm not bullshitting here. You have to do exactly the best you can every minute until you're out of this thing, because we're not talking about, writing a script or something like that. This is here, this is now, and you don't know what you're going to be forgiven and what you're not going to be forgiven.
It seems to me that, in the way that you were describing your dream state versus your state of awareness on the boat, that's kind of analogous for how the survival situation seems to be divvied up between activity and inactivity. It has to be this almost it's like meditation, almost like a really active passiveness, if that makes sense. Is that
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, I realized that I had to ration everything, and that included my own energy.
What does that look like?
Well, it meant that, okay, the morning comes and I'm feeling pretty good and chipper. I'm going to do everything that I need to do in the morning, top up the raft with this little pump that I called the Beast. To keep the tubes tight and all that kind of stuff. And, when I'm in shape, I can do that. But then, at a certain point, it's like, oh, okay, now's not really a good time to fish because the fish go off and they do their routine. You learn the secrets of your universe. And so it's like, yeah, I could stand there for, the next 4 hours trying to catch a fish, but that's probably wasted energy. It's better for me now to conserve my energy, try to stay cool or warm, depending on where we were in the voyage, that kind of thing. But it's a constant shuffle.
What does the rest of your time look like from developing your routine post-wreckage in that stretch of water before it gets, between the Canary Islands and where it starts getting warm? About how many days do you think that is? Like,
well, I don't know. It's such a slow transition, really. It's not like going through the Gulf Stream where, you're in cold water off the East Coast and then all of a sudden you're actually seeing like right there, all of a sudden the temperature's getting to be 90 degrees or 85 or something.
A better place for me to go before we get there is you had mapped your progress in a startlingly effective way. You were kind of plotting as you were going and kind of being like, okay, I think that I might hit this if I keep going here, and if I miss this, I will go to this.
Right.
Onward and onward. You measured how fast you were going, or made a rough measurement of how fast you were going. Can you describe like plotting your trajectory?
I trailed a line out the back of the raft that had this man overboard pole that I'd yanked off in Napoleon Solo, and I tied a bunch of mirrors to it because I figured, well, it might be up on a crest while the raft is down, and vice versa. So it's reflecting light. So if maybe somebody goes by, they might see that. And it was very convenient in terms of the length of it. So I made up a little speed distance table. So I could time a piece of seaweed, say, or I had a chart of the Indian Ocean, which I didn't need. I might crumple up a little piece of that and put it in the water. And I would time when it passed the man overboard pole, so I could tell what speed I was going through the water. And in the chart that I had, it estimated what the currents were, which I think were probably a little overdone. I had an unbreakable compass in the sky. In the morning, the sun would rise, and I had a table of declinations in my survival manual written by another ocean survival, Douglas Robertson.
What is a table of declinations?
It tells you basically if you're at this latitude that the sun is rising at this angle from you. So you can tell a direction.
Not just east, but like this kind of east.
Not just east. It's 110 degrees or something if you're on this latitude, whatever. And at night, of course, I could see the North Star and stuff like that. So I had unbreakable compass in the heavens, a little speed distance table and whatnot, and I would sit there and plot. Oh, I went this far in the chart today.
Was that something that gave you a level of like solace and control, or was
definitely.
that something? Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, like I say, I mean, all that stuff, keeping a log, exercising and everything, normalizing life as much as possible is really important so that you might not have control of your life, but you can at least have some effect on it.
Are you talking to yourself on the raft to kind of...
Mostly in my head.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really... It was weird at the end of the voyage actually getting out and talking to people.
Yeah.
That was strange.
So I imagine, stranded alone on a raft, talking to yourself might be a little comfortable and...
Yeah, but I do that kind of, I don't know, as a writer and stuff like that. I'm always talking in my head.
Sure.
What,
Sometimes I did do it out loud. Yeah. There are times, like I had some meltdowns. I really did have some meltdowns where I was just like, you wouldn't believe the curses that came out of this mouth. It drives my wife crazy if I get out and get really ticked off or something and start cursing Neptune or something or other. She goes, oh, no, don't do that. You have no idea how I've cursed Neptune at times, that kind of thing. Or it just frustrated, like I went through a period of time where it was stormy again and whatnot, and the raft almost get picked up, almost flipped over, and all this water gets comes in the raft. And I'm spending about half my time wet anyway, and I get all these saltwater sores, which are like little open ulcers on the skin, hundreds of those. They're not very pleasant. And so I just get the raft bailed out, and then all of a sudden the same thing would happen again. And I just lost it one day. And again, with this kind of splitting of the personality, there was part of me that was saying, you're being an idiot, this is silly. I mean, you're acting like a 5-year-old. And then that 5-year-old was saying, I don't give a damn. I need to do this right now. And then after 10 minutes or something or other, I chilled out and it's time to move on. But sometimes you just need to unload.
Well, yeah, I mean, because if you got all that pent up, you can make a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're like, get yourself to a place of calmness, at least you're maybe making bad decisions for 10 minutes, not 10 days, 10 hours.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes it's a balance of those things. Trying to keep your emotional self together is a challenge for sure. There are times where I sang, actually. I had a couple of favorite songs. They're Beatles songs, Help, and which is like totally suited my life.
Yeah.
And there's another one about I'm so tired, I haven't slept a wink, I'm so tired.
Or what is that Beach Boys song, Sloop John B?
Yeah. So, things like that come back to you.
What, okay, so you're plotting your course. What was the best case scenario as far as where you might expect to land? Like, what is like I hope that I'm plotting this right, because if that means this, then I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'll do it for the camera. If you've got the United States with Florida, and you've got the Caribbean islands like Cuba and Puerto Rico, and then the island chain curves down and it goes kind of almost north-south. So anywhere along that line would have been okay. Because that would be the closest to me. Antigua's pretty close. I was worried that if, with the currents and things, as they get close to those islands, the currents sweep to, first of all, they're going west, and then they kind of bend up and end up going north, and then back, get swept up in the Gulf Stream, and next stop is England. I definitely didn't want to do that, so I tried to coax the raft to go south as best I could, just hoping that I would get someplace. Oh, I could tow the man overboard pole it had this exterior hand line, and I could slide that along to kind of tilt the raft and hopefully guide it like a sailboat, like a really low aspect sail. Just kind of coax it to go. Even 1 degree or 2 degrees can make a huge difference. So I did that and actually landed on Marie Galante, which is probably about the best I could have done in terms of the easternmost island. But I was worried by the end. I thought I might have missed the islands entirely, and that all my navigation was total nuts. But
going back to the fishing stuff, describe the first fish that you successfully caught with that spear gun. The role the spear gun kind of played throughout that trip is both something that could bring good stuff and something that could cause complete disaster.
Yeah.
And then
it almost did both.
And then I would love to hear more about your feelings on the fish as these beings.
Yeah. Well, I was starting to get to know them. They had different behavior patterns too. Like there was this big male that liked to come up in the middle of the afternoon and whack the side of the raft and push it around on the ocean. I just thought it was entertainment for him, Some I could recognize, there's the one that still has that piece of line trailing from its mouth where I tried to catch it, or have these scars and stuff like that. So I started to get to know them kind of individually, and they were just so beautiful and talented, and I don't know, just these supreme creatures, really. And but I knew I had to eat them. And it was as time went on, I got more and more attached. At first, they were really more of hey, There's
Yeah,
a chunk
yeah.
of food right there. So I was very happy to have caught that first fish, but like I say, it's a dangerous operation because I'm catching a fish with a spear in an inflated raft. So I made sure I had everything really prepared to pad as much as possible and all that kind of stuff. And but as time went on, it got more and more difficult. One of the most crushing things for me personally was there was a fish that went by, and I shot the spear gun, and it hit the fish and right along the spine. You can usually see there's like a line that runs down along the spine.
Lateral line.
Yeah, this lateral line. And so I hit it, but it didn't drive all the way through the fish. And so I'm pulling it back into the raft really slowly and gingerly. And just as I'm starting to try to pick it up, it falls off the end of the spear and it's dead. And this is a whole scene in Adrift too, because it was like, it starts spiraling down under the ocean. I'm watching it spiraling down. And the weirdest thing that all these other Dorado dove down to it. And it was like, really, it was like this whirling flower of, you know, the dead fish in the middle and all these like little petals of other fish reaching down to it. And it was just devastating to me, the waste, you know, it just was really horrible for me. But after that, I don't know, I just tried to catch what I needed because I needed to also ration the use of my equipment. The fish were an obvious threat. They proved themselves very strong and capable of beating me up quite a bit. And they kept breaking the spear gun. The power strap disappeared. So then I tied it together and I had to learn how to use this very shorty spear close to the raft.
Oh, not the power strap. You're talking about tying that thing to make just like a hand spear.
It's like a hand spear now, yeah. So that was the first thing to go, was this, you know, the elastic strap that shoots the spear. So then I had to use it like that, and then they would break it again and again. And on the 43rd day, one managed to break the end off and twist the spear around and run it into the bottom tube, which put a hole in the bottom tube of the raft, and that was a total disaster. So, and it took me really very close to the edge of death to figure that out.
How did you end up figuring that out? Because it seemed to me that there were a handful, like, really, I mean, the whole challenge is like profound, right? But like the major existential things are the solar stills in the water collection.
Right.
Because at one point you made yourself horribly sick.
Yeah, I did. I had some polluted water, or I thought was polluted water, and I kept trying to make it more drinkable. And all the canopy of the raft is international distress orange, or at least it started out that way and ended up almost as white as your shirt by the end of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And all these like little orange particulates were coming off. I mean, you can collect water off the canopy, but it was undrinkable. It was literally like trying to drink somebody's vomit.
Just acrid.
It was, it's just so horribly disgusting. So I tried to dilute it and do all this other stuff, and in the end I just made myself sick. But it didn't last too long, fortunately.
The other existential threat is getting this puncture in the raft.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a series of, the way that I was imagining it in your book is that it's an octagonal kind of like.
It's more roundish. I mean, it's made by segments, but basically it's a round raft, and there are two tubes that are isolated from one another. Inner tubes, nobody uses inner tubes anymore. When I was a kid, they were standard, but you know, it's like that, one stacked on top of the other. And then there's an inflated arch that holds up the tent that's over the whole thing. And then there's a thin rubber, it's like a 16th inch or 8th inch of reinforced rubber across the bottom. That's it. You're feeling every bubble that goes under the raft. I told people it was like living on a waterbed with a couple of kangaroos. And I got pretty good at moving around in it. And towards the end, if it was kind of a nice day like today, and open ocean waves, maybe a few feet, something like that, and I could get up and I'd stand up in the raft regularly, and sometimes not. I could even let go of the canopy and just like balance my legs as the waves went underneath and that kind of thing.
Well, so this hole that gets torn in one of the pontoons,
right?
Which pontoon was it?
It's the bottom one, which is a nightmare because the water pressure would push up on it. So you end up with this big bubble on the inside, and that loses the shape that gives you the freeboard. It's a little hard to explain.
It takes it from being something that's deep enough to
instead of having let's say a foot of freeboard or 14 inches or something or other, it ends up being a couple inches.
It's the difference between trying to hold a golf ball in a bowl versus trying to hold a golf ball on a plate.
I guess so. I don't know.
Well, you see what I'm saying? What I'm getting at, though, it's like the sides are kind of like
Yeah. Basically, like a ship can be made of steel and float because if it's the total displacement of the shape underwater. Well, if you destroy that shape, all of a sudden,
that makes a lot more sense.
That's going to sink. So the whole raft, even moving around in it, was an incredible nightmare. It was, I say it's like water walking through rubber quicksand, and I was worried about my legs being hit or beaten, bitten or whatever, that kind of threat. And so it was really, and plus I'm dragging this bag of water through the ocean. It's not, all of a sudden I'm not going very fast, and the whole structure of the raft gets very wobbly. It made it really difficult to almost impossible to fish or produce water or really be functional at all.
And this is caused by the spear gun ripping a hole in this thing?
Yeah, I tore a hole in the bottom that's, pretty big, and there's no real clear way of how do you fix this thing because...
What'd you do?
Well, I tried all kinds of things, and I tried to, I had this foam, this closed cell foam that doesn't... Closed cell foams are like little individual bubbles. They don't let water or air pass through them, and so it's really good. It's waterproof. And so I cut a piece of that out and made like a tongue, like if you think of the hole as your mouth, I put this thing in it and wrapped around it. But then as soon as I inflated the raft, what to do? Well, I can pucker like this, but if I didn't pull it this way, the tongue falls out. So I tried external pressure patches. I tried tying it harder and tighter till I wore a hole in my arm. I don't know. I just tried all this stuff and nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. And it really brought me to a very low point where I thought that was it. I wasn't going to go any further. And it kind of woke me up. I had this big adrenaline spike because I realized I'd pretty much given up. It was like, water's washing in and out of the raft. I mean, I'm done. I just can't. I didn't have any more strength to deal with this. And then I realized, it really came on me. I was like, you're not just talking about this as being a possible eventuality. This is happening.
This is impending.
This is it. And you got to make a choice here. And it woke me up, kind of slapped me in the face, at least metaphorically. And I went through all the equipment that I had, and what can I do? What can I do? It's a different approach. I mean, you're always balancing these things. Some things you give up for a reason because they don't work. Then that gets into being the insanity thing where you keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. But there's a certain, I'm a very tenacious person. I'm very persistent, and I tend to figure out, okay, that's what didn't work. So how do we address that part of the problem? And I've been very good at that most of my life with different things. And in this case, I just had run up against a wall. It's like I just keep doing the same thing again and again, and it's just not going to work. But I finally sat down and figured it out. It's like, oh, well, what do I have? And something sparked that idea in me. And it was like, you've got this fork, and you can break the handle off and make a pin and drive it down in there. And then you can lash stuff around, and it doesn't matter how much the raft wants to straighten it out. It can't do it because I've got this pin driven right through it. Why I didn't think of that a week ago before it was, that's another thing where you got to forgive yourself for not seeing what in hindsight was obvious.
When was this in relation to your, like around what day?
43rd day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I had a party kind of for myself, which meant I allowed myself to drink like, I don't know, a half a pint of water or something like that, which I was carefully stocking. On the 38th day, because the survival manual that I carried was written by Dougal Robertson, who was 38 days adrift in the Pacific with his family, and it was a really good manual. And to me, to even equal that, he was incredibly, the whole family, and he were incredibly creative in solving problems and making special tools and whatnot. So, to me, I had a party. I was like, I made it to his benchmark, and I never thought I would. And then just a few days later, this happened, and it lasted until I think the 50th day or something like that. And that entered, I'd gone through the recoil and slow adaptation, which is what we want all survivors to get to, really, though you can live indefinitely in your situation and once you're kind of fully adapted. And then this crisis within the crisis, which often happens, and that took me into a final stage, which was basically just hanging on day by day. My body was pretty wasted by that time.
We are coming up to our own very minor water crisis. Astute viewers will notice that we have moved up the log. So we were talking about the final, kind of like the home stretch, where you solve this problem with your pontoon being all messed up. And now you're, as you say, you're like day by day in it.
Yeah.
What's that like? Because I would imagine, and it should be noted, and you guys should really read the book Adrift. You can find it pretty much everywhere. And also you can get a really great audio book that you read.
Yeah.
And it comes with like a radio interview from the 80s.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, dude. Well, you should check that out. It's pretty cool. No, it was really insightful. It was a cool little interview. It wasn't super long, but yeah. Anyhow, you get to this point where after all this, and as I was about to say, multiple ships coming by. I mean,
I don't know, 9 ships or something by the end of it.
At a certain point, did you just like not care about the ships?
Oh yeah, by the end of it. It was like I had no more flares then anyway.
You were like, there's one.
It was like, okay, see ya. It was a 9, there's no way that was going to see me, so.
Was that easy to get over?
I think I entered a kind of very fatalistic period of my life, which has probably gone to the current day, which is, things are what they're going to be what they are. It doesn't mean you have to be apathetic about steering your own course or anything like that, but if I die, I die. If I don't, I don't. The ship is probably a good sign.
Right, sure.
Because I'm interpreting things in terms of when I'm in shipping lanes or where they might be and so on. And I'd been waiting, actually, by the last one, I'd been waiting to see islands for some days. And I was starting to wonder, am I dead?
Is this purgatory?
Yeah, kind of like that. And I said, in a rational sense, I said, no, of course not. That's absolute nonsense. But on the other hand, anything is possible. And I don't know, I just felt, how maybe I'm fated to drift forever in this bloody raft. And so I don't know, it doesn't do you any good. It didn't do me any good to, moan about the ship. All these other ships had passed me. And it was after the first ship was kind of heartbreaking, but it was mostly heartbreaking because of my mismanagement of the situation. And so even by the second or the third ship, when they still went quite close, it was like I had no expectations. And I think that was a big part of it is not to have expectations.
that's a really good way to like work within your mental health. Your physical health at this point is like a major problem in that you have all these like open wounds because of the salt. And
Yeah.
I would imagine sunburn and just.
No, I wasn't. I had been outside sailing for almost a year beforehand. Although you can't see it now, but you know, when I tanned as a young bloke, I'd end up looking like mahogany. I mean, I was pretty dark, and sunburn itself was sun exhaustion and that kind of thing. You know, heat exhaustion. That was a much more major issue. But I wasn't worried about the sunburn. But I did have lots of saltwater sores. You can actually, I don't know if you see any of these like little white dots and stuff, those are all from saltwater sores from back then. Really? I had hundreds of them. And then they would be all like on my ass and, you know, knee, you know, in places where you put pressure, which meant that I was in pain basically all the time. Because like I say, if you ever had a canker sore, it's like having a canker sore, only I had hundreds of these things.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't a lot of fun. But I knew that they weren't going to kill me exactly. And I'd lost about a third of my weight. So I was pretty weak. But otherwise, in pretty decent shape overall. And my brother told me, you know, I missed my opportunity because I shouldn't have written Adrift. I should have written this Stevie Callahan's Secret to Thinner Thighs in 76 days.
You know, I think some people may have tried it. I don't think it would have caught on.
Hey, it's pretty much like the Long Beach diet, isn't it? It's high protein, nothing else.
What did I'm trying to like kind of like wrap up like the prevailing feelings of those final days. You know, the
hope, but increasing kind of worry, apprehension.
What was giving you hope?
What was giving me hope was every day I'm in this raft, every minute I'm in this raft is a minute closer to a successful resolution. And I have to have faith in, you know, my navigation and what I'm doing here.
And you were beginning to see physical like signs that you were entering.
You know, bird life started showing up that, you know, kind of, again, Dougal Robertson's manual, you know, was showing, migration patterns of birds, you know. A friend of mine in New Zealand kind of coined this term natural literacy. And that's something that anybody who wanders around in the wilderness or makes their life on the sea, fishermen, whoever, they develop a natural literacy, which is, you know, what does that pattern on the water tell you? What does this tell you? What does that bird tell you about what's going on? And so this was a part of that. I started seeing what I thought was a bit of change in color. I went through what I called the highway of trash, which was all kinds of weed, but also human waste, all bundled up in this highway that stretched from one horizon to the other, which was a sign of current changes, bird life, etc. So I had those hopes, but I was also very apprehensive that I may have been just kidding myself and I was swept up in a current and I was going to go to at least the Bahamas, if not England, before I actually reached any kind of safety. And if it had been England, forget about it. There's no way I would have made it.
Well, that didn't happen.
No.
You ended up, you know,
like the Dorado are this, I can tell you, they're the stars of the show, the show.
Yeah.
Because it was the Dorado, they're so symbolic in this whole tale because they fed me. They were spiritual guides.
Here, move down the log with me a little bit, because I see you're starting to get wet.
All right. They're spiritual guides in many ways. They almost killed me. And in the end, they brought my salvation. Because the Dorado, this whole school of fish that had been building over time, more and more fish, even if I pluck one out, there would be more that would show up. They surround the raft and they feed on flying fish, which is what frigate birds feed on. Now, frigate birds are not supposed to spend a night at sea, although I think that that's completely wrong because at first light I would look up and there would be some. But fishermen from this island, which I found out later, they had never fished on the windward side of the island. They always stayed on the leeward side, you know, and but they hadn't been having much luck, so they went on the windward side and they look out to sea, and being smart guys, they saw all these birds hovering, and there was a sign that fish were in there, so they came out to find the fish, and I'm floating around in the middle of them.
And what did you do? Because your reaction is insane to me.
I know, everybody says that, and to me it was like completely logical in a way. I didn't reason it, you know, it was just this emotional, psychological, rational outpouring. These fishermen are there, they're living right on the edge the way I've been living, but I've been fortunate. It's only been 2.5 months of my life. These fishermen in the Caribbean, they are not wealthy people. It's a real tough living. And so, and here I had nothing to give them except the most precious thing that I had, which was the Dorado. And so I told them, fish, the greatest fish in the world are right here. And so they buzzed around the raft. They kept an eye on me. And, you know, I'd see them pulling the fish in on the boat. And eventually it got to be the afternoon bake-off. And I was having a hard time kind of just staying upright, and they could see that. So they loaded me on the boat, and we all went ashore with me sitting, feeling like a bit of a Judas, surrounded by my fishy buddies.
Huh. Must have had a boat come by. This is a first. I don't think we've ever done one with the
tide coming up?
A tripod in the water.
Yeah.
What, we're going to wrap up here in just a minute.
Okay. Yeah, the tide says it has to happen.
Things are how they are, man, right now.
Exactly.
What, you come back, you get some medical attention, you write this book. You as a person, what is the thing? Like what is, you know what I mean? What's like the thing?
I'm not sure if there is just like one thing. I took away so much from this. I'm not sure anybody's put it quite that way before. Like I say, there's so many things that I've talked about in this, about, well, lessons about...
you can give me a few. It doesn't have to just be.
All right. Well, one is about, you know, it fascinates me. Let me tell you this. There's a big question for me is that I have met so many people who've gone through incredible things.
If I get what I get what.
As we may happen to do in a moment. And what fascinates me is how different they process it and face it. It's like, what does that mean exactly? Oh, that's all right. I'm okay.
Okay.
You know, there's been a saying for many years, quoted by many people or attributed to several people, that, you know, problems are opportunities in disguise. Or things to that effect. And I think that's true. I mean, this tale for me is exactly that. I learned so much about myself in the world by going through this that I could only have been awakened to by going through this. And it didn't include just that I was a lot more resilient and stronger than I thought I was, but it also was like, oh, here are all my weaknesses. Oh my God, you're terrible at that. You're terrible at this. You need to work on that. And part of that came from even the Recoil stuff about, you know, repurposing my life, if you will. So it gave me that opportunity to come back and do that, to discover the opportunities that were hidden in this, what was really kind of a hellish experience in many ways, but also gave me views that were like, oh my God. Kathy says the core of Adrift is a line I wrote in my little paper logs. It's a view of heaven from a seat in hell. So that's it.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, man, for sharing all this with me, sharing this with all of us. God, I can't think of a better place to end it. Can you?
No, that's good.
I think the tide
And we're
wants
about
us
to
to
drown.
stop. Let's go. See you guys next time. That's beautiful.
That's fantastic.
Oh, good.
The gunboat continues up to Cumbie Ferry, and we know that Harriet Tubman, her men, James Montgomery, were on the gunboat. So this boat stops at Cumbie Ferry, and it tries to go up past Cumbie Ferry, and it encounters the obstructions that the Cumbie planters had put in the river. Mm-hmm. So it turns around and comes back. And here, 2 more companies of the 2nd South Carolina disembark, and 2 disembarked at Longbrow. And at both Longbrow and Cumbie Ferry, they also send out rowboats to more distant plantations. We know that Tubman was on a rowboat. That rowboat probably went to a plantation called Bonnie Hall, which is a little bit further off the river. But a number of people from Bonnie Hall were liberated in the raid. Tubman talks about people on the rowboats, people who got to the river too late to get on the boat. The boat was already full. They were afraid it was going to capsize. And the people who got there too late are holding on to the sides of the rowboat to keep it from taking off. And Colonel Montgomery was there. He asks Tubman to sing to her people to calm them. And later in life, in interviews, Tubman says, you know, those were not my people. She said they weren't any more my people than they were his people, except we were all Negroes, right? So she's like, okay, whatever. Yeah. But she sings. And in the song, she sings Hallelujah. And the freedom seekers throw their hands up. And they've taken their hands off the rowboats. So then the rowboat is able to push away.